Welcome back to Close Up. We're about 3 weeks out from Election Day. We've jumped into the thick of the battle for the 2nd Congressional District, an open seat this cycle. We're joined now by the Democratic nominee, Maggie Goodlander. Ms. Goodlander, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
So let's start with contrast. What is the biggest difference between you and your opponent, Lily Tong Williams?
You know, Adam, I got into this race. This is a job interview for a really hard job in an unprecedented moment in our nation's history. And I come to this race having dedicated my life to serving our state and our country in all branches of government, in the United States Navy as an intelligence officer, where I served for 11 years. I've always worked on a bipartisan basis in every job I've ever done, whether it was in the United States Senate as a staffer, helping to craft a landmark sanctions law, imposing accountability on Vladimir Putin and his regime. This was 10 years before the most recent invasion of Ukraine. From that to the work I did on the front lines of the fight against corporate monopolies that are jacking up costs for hardworking people across New Hampshire, to the work I did at the White House leading the Unity Agenda, which is an agenda that doesn't get a lot of attention, but that's rooted in the idea that we can still come together as Republicans and Democrats to solve the challenges that unite us as Americans. That's the spirit that I bring to this work. And my opponent has a different set of experiences. She's made different life choices. And I think as I look at where she stands on the biggest issues that I hear about from voters all across our district, and for a small state, it's a big district, almost 6,500 square miles. People are feeling pain of high prices. They want people who can get to work right out of the gate. 2 years goes by in a flash in the life of a federal government worker and in the life of a member of Congress. And I'm in this race because I believe that I can deliver for the people of the 2nd District on day one.
One of Ms. Tong Williams' criticisms is that voters deserve to see more of you together, highlighting differences essentially side by side, whether that's in forums or debates. She's got a list of several events she says she's participating in and allegedly that you are not. Because both of you are new to the voters, shouldn't you be doing more of those kind of forums and debates?
Well, Adam, I'm really looking forward to joining you on October 31st for a debate right here at WMUR, and thank you for hosting us. We're going to be debating multiple times between now and Election Day on November 5th. You know, I have been running an old school New Hampshire campaign. We are pounding the pavement, meeting people where they are, answering questions. It's part of what has made, for me, being a candidate here in New Hampshire. No one does democracy better than we do. You know, you learn how to grill a candidate before you learn how to grill a hot dog growing up here. And I get questions from voters every single day. It's part of the job interview process, and it's something I welcome and seek out every single day on the campaign trail.
Specifically the event at Plymouth State, we've had students reaching out to us asking how to get in contact with you to try and do a forum there at Plymouth State. Lily Tong Williams says you're not going to participate. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that specific event, but Plymouth State is a campus that I look forward to visiting. I've visited Plymouth and the surrounding towns multiple times on the campaign trail and look forward to doing so again between now and November 5th.
Democrats are losing ground with some core constituencies, according to polling, and some would say that's due in part to the Biden administration's policy at the border. A lot of people are mad about the number of people who've come across illegally, and then the undocumented migrants are here. The perception is that they're getting a lot more help than U.S. citizens who've been living in poverty in America for a long time have been. If you're elected, how far does your support for the undocumented migrants go? For instance, would you support a pathway to citizenship for the 11 to 13 million who are already here?
Well, Adam, look, we are a nation of immigrants, and my family's story, my great-grandfather came to this country more than 100 years ago through Ellis Island when we had immigration laws and an immigration system that were funded and written for that moment. Congress has not taken the action it needs to take to update those laws. We have a system that is outdated, that is overburdened, that's been chronically underfunded. And that's why early in my career, I went to the United States Senate. And I worked for Senator John McCain, who was helping, together with Senator Chuck Schumer, lead a bipartisan effort to take a hard look at our immigration laws and at our border security. And we passed, at a time when no one thought it was possible to get it through the United States Senate, we passed a comprehensive immigration reform and border security bill. One of my early heartbreaks in government was seeing that bill not make its way through the House of Representatives. But that bill has become a framework for the future. And it continues to be a framework for reform. In fact, it was the framework from which bipartisan members of Congress worked just earlier this year to come up with a comprehensive bill that would have protected security at our border, and that would have updated our immigration laws and system to meet the moment. There is one reason why that bill hasn't been signed into law, and it is because Donald Trump decided that it wasn't in his personal political interest for that bill to become law. But what I can tell you is I am going to always work on a bipartisan basis for solutions including to updating our immigration laws. And so that's the spirit I'm going to bring to this work. And, you know, my opponent has opposed the comprehensive bipartisan bill that should have been signed into law earlier this year.
To that question, though, that I asked, that bill did not include a pathway to citizenship. Would you want to see that come back as it was in the original bill if you're in Congress?
Adam, what I saw in my experience negotiating this bill, you know, it's not an easy thing to work on a bipartisan basis to try to update our immigration laws, something as thorny as our immigration laws. Really, in any area, it takes an open mind and a lot of patience and a willingness to look at the facts and where the law needs to be. And what I tell you is I think part of what I saw is sometimes comprehensive can be the enemy of progress. And so I believe there should be a pathway to citizenship myself. Whether it should be in a comprehensive bill or not is a question of what the art of the possible will be, and I will always work in a spirit to get what done we must get done as best we can.
Let's move to the issue of abortion. There are about a dozen states that ban elective abortion after a fetus gains viability, including California and New York. The Women's Health Protection Act that is supported by Democrats in Congress, some would argue would loosen these laws and sort of invalidate these viability laws, even in these deep blue states. What is the goal of invalidating a viability law?
Well, Adam, just stepping back, you know, what happened in this country 2 years ago when the United States Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision, what happened there was the court ripped away a fundamental right that has been so core to gender equality in this country, that has been so core to ensuring that women get access to the health care they need in this country and that doctors can provide that care when they need to. What we saw, and I think many of the viewers out there probably remember, as I do, where I was the day that decision came down. I was at the Justice Department helping to stand up a reproductive rights task force dedicated to the simple idea that women in this country should get access to the health care they need and doctors should be able to provide that care. What happened in the Dobbs decision was an upending. It was chaos across this country. We have conflicting laws all across the United States of America, and that is why I believe the fight to restore reproductive freedom, from access to abortion services to access to contraception, which is a right that has now been called into question. It's because of the Dobbs decision. It opened up a Pandora's box of problems for women trying to access health care in this country. It's also called into question access to IVF. You know, the decision of if, when, and how to become a parent is a decision that a judge and a politician has no place in. It's a decision that women and families should make together with their health care providers.
To the question, though, of viability, should the law instituted at a federal level, if it can get passed or not, why should it be less restrictive than what these deep blue states already have?
You know, Adam, what I've seen, and I was a law clerk on the United States Supreme Court. I worked at the Justice Department. I've seen how, in practice, trying to draw lines in this space ends up resulting in real dangers and sometimes even death for women. So I think trying to legislate this is not the answer. The answer is to allow women and their healthcare providers to make the decisions they need to make.
This is a question we used to ask a lot. We don't hear it as much anymore. What are you going to do to help the economic realities in the North Country?
You know, I have loved the time I've spent listening and learning from communities across our North Country. I think, you know, I'm from Nashua, so down south. But what I've been really struck by are the common threads in the concerns that I've heard from Nashua all the way north of Dixville Notch, all the way up to the Canadian border. You know, whether I'm in Berlin or in Nashua or in Lebanon, the concerns that I'm hearing from people are pain of high prices. And often, you know, one of the drivers of these high prices, Adam, what I saw on the front lines of the fight at the Justice Department against corporate monopolies that are jacking up costs. And what we've seen are family businesses that are being driven out of business all across our economy. Whether we're talking about funeral homes or veterinarian clinics, in the work I did at the Justice Department, we saw that these practices impact people, hardworking people across our economy. And I think the same is true here in New Hampshire. You know, as I said before, the 2nd District, for a small state, it's a big district, 6,500 square miles, with unique concerns for communities even within regions of the district, including in the North Country. But I do believe there are common threads, and I believe that Congress has got to get to work. It's not enough for us to say to a hardworking person, get a 3rd job or a 4th job. Congress has got to step up and take action, and that's what I want to do right out of the gate.
All right, Maggie Goodlander, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We'll see you in a few weeks for that debate.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, and we'll be right back with Senator Cory Booker on the Democrats' dilemma in the Middle East. Stay with us.